Alright guys, sorry I've been away for a while. Let's get back into this. Convergence 2012, continuing. Chapter 42, Atlantis. January 1st, 2012, Bimini, 9:37 a.m. Tim had spent a couple of hours coming to grip with the fact that the world as he knew it was going to end. He worried about his sister and her family. He wondered if he asked ᶠᶸᵏ would he put a good word in for Tim's family. Joy's family was all gone as far as Tim knew. She never spoke of anyone important, and as he glanced at her, he saw she was off in her own world, same as he was. The sun was up and a gentle breeze was blowing. Wisps of their hair danced around her pretty face, and he was relieved that he had her by his side. He realized that if anything happened to her, he wouldn't care if he lived or died. "Hey, you," he said to get her attention. She snapped back to him and smiled softly. "What?" "Penny for your thoughts. I was just wondering how it'll be when this convergence is done." "Yeah, just when we were comfortable with dragon killers and aliens, we learned that the Earth is gonna wake up all grumpy and shit." "Yeah, I'm kinda numb in a way. It's like all the stuff we watch in movies. It's kinda real. I mean, what the hell? What else is gonna happen? Who knows? But you know what?" "What?" He pulled her close to him and stared deep in her eyes with such intensity she was momentarily taken aback. "I really don't care, as long as I have you with me." She kissed him for a brief moment, was lost in eternity with him. "How are you doing that?" Startled, Tim and Joy spun around to see Țânări staring at them, with her mouth slightly open. "What?" Tim looked around and noticed the area around them was scorched and blackened. Joy was shocked as well, and she noticed a slight reddish glow fading from her and Tim. "Whoa, we need to be careful, Tim." "Shit, I was just kissing you. I didn't know that was gonna happen." Țânări crouched down and placed one hand on the ground and one hand on her necklace. Chanting silently, she closed her eyes. The blackness faded from the ground and the grass grew back quickly. "Wow," said Joy. "I wonder how you are manipulating," said Țânări. "You need a necklace to do things?" "Yes, and the chant. Only the elder Anukai can manipulate with will alone. And here you are manipulating inadvertently. How is this possible?" "Got me," said Tim. "I was just getting my Mac on with my wifey. Maybe we're just hot stuff." Joy jabbed him. "Tim, be serious, will you? Țânări's concerned." "Yes, I am. What if you have a nightmare and lash out in your sleep?" Tim hadn't thought about that. He hadn't needed to. This was the first time something like this had happened. "Well, usually we have to think real hard to make it happen," Tim said with his best redneck imitation. "That's true. Tim's had a hard time making things happen. But there was the time I got shot." "Well, I was freaked the fuck out. I thought they had wasted you. I didn't really think. It just happened." Țânări nodded. "So you manifest when you have strong feelings for joy?" Tim shrugged. "Got me. Isn't there some test that ᶠᶸᵏ can do or something?" "We'll see. You may ask this of him. We are preparing to leave. I didn't want to interrupt you, but when I saw the flames..." Joy smiled and started walking with Tim at her side. "No worries, Țânări. Where to?" "We are to meet ᶠᶸᵏ and Rachel by the beach where the Earth's milk has appeared." They walked on in silence for the next 15 minutes, and as they got nearer to their location, they noticed a huge crowd all sampling the liquid as it gently crashed against the shore. The troops which had been along the beach had moved their operations to a platform out on the water a few hundred yards away from the shore, almost directly above the center of the white liquid. There were hundreds of people on the beach. Someone wise had ordered the soldiers to stand down and let the people grab what they wanted. On the outer ring of the mob were ᶠᶸᵏ and Rachel in a very animated discussion of some sort. As they got closer, Rachel stopped and turned to face them. "So have you guys heard yet?" "Heard what?" "Where we're going." It was obvious that Rachel was very excited. "Yeah, we've heard," said Tim. "Isn't it amazing? According to ᶠᶸᵏ, it's been there all the time, just kind of hidden from us." "Hidden?" ᶠᶸᵏ nodded. "I'll tell you more in a moment. There are too many people here, and no telling if there are drakes. So I'll make this brief. We'll continue walking along the beach. When we're clear of all the people, walk into the ocean, but make sure you do not go further than 100 yards from me." Tim was fine with the instructions, but he could see a look in Joy's eyes. "Babe, trust me. If the man says something, just do it. It'll seem a bit weird, but trust me, you'll be fine." She nodded. She was sure if ᶠᶸᶜᵏ had a plan, it would be fine. They walked a little ways, and when ᶠᶸᶜᵏ was confident there wasn't many people nearby, he focused on a group, and suddenly there was a slight whooshing sensation which covered them all, and a slight chill filled Joy, and she realized the warmth of the sun was gone. She glanced at Tim and saw he had a slight shimmer around him. "What the hell?" Tim grinned. "Kinda tickles." Joy could barely hear him. "What?" "I said it tickles." She nodded. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ started walking into the water, and Tim followed. As they came in contact with the water, Tim was expecting the cool water to soak his shoes and clothing. Instead, the water passed around him, and he noticed that there was a thin barrier between him and the water. Joy caught up to him, and she noticed the same thing. "So weird. At least you can breathe." Tim thought back to the passing through the solid walls of New York and the painful sensation that accompanied it. She nodded and took his hand, and noticed for a brief second it was hard to grip his hand. They continued walking. In a few seconds more, they were completely submerged. They didn't have to fight the current to swim. They just walked, and there was a slight effort on their part as they made their way deeper and deeper. Soon it was getting hard to see. "ᶠᶸᶜᵏ!" He stopped, and after a second nodded. He closed his eyes, and a brilliant light surrounded them, which more than illuminated the area nearby. A few hundred yards away, they saw a few sharks which seemed interested in them for a moment and then swam away quickly. Tim glanced at Rachel, kept holding her breath, and then gasping and quickly grabbing more air. "Rachel!" She turned and looked at Tim. "Relax. You can breathe." "It's scary." Tim nodded. "Actually, you don't even need to speak. You're not really able to hear each other anyways. I've been conveying your thoughts with each exchange. Just think towards the person you want to speak with." ᶠᶸᶜᵏ's voice was loud in Joy's head. "Hey, can you turn the volume down?" "Interesting. Am I too loud for the rest of you?" Tim and Rachel shook their heads. "I will tone it down for you, Joy." "Thanks." "So how far is it to Atlantis?" "Roughly 1,466 miles. "Are we walking that?" asked Tim. "No, there's a transporter about 12 miles out." "Transporter?" ᶠᶸᶜᵏ smiled. "You'll see." Tim shrugged. He was so overwhelmed with everything that he was unshakable. Soon they started seeing large stone slabs on the ocean surface, and Tim wondered if these were roads or just some natural occurrence of rocks which looks like roads to him. "It is a road, Tim. There is much under the ground which will be revealed soon enough. The Atlanteans were a marvelous group of Anunnaki who stayed on the crust while the bulk of us left to the outer dimension. They kept an eye on the humans for a while. When the crust shifted, the landmass dropped under the water. When the earth wakes and slumbers, the landmass shifts and changes drastically. After this convergence, you'll be one of the first to see the new Atlantis." "Swell. Will we still have PlayStations and the internet?" "No, not exactly. There are things we have which should replace those distractions. Trust me, Tim. It's not as grim as you fear. True, in some ways things will be very different, but overall, things could be much worse." "Yeah, I could be dead." "Exactly." The walking was getting harder, and Tim wondered if it was the current picking up around them. He wondered if they got separated, what would happen. "It's not good. Stay close." They continued on for a few hours, and suddenly ᶠᶸᶜᵏ stopped and motioned for everyone to be still. Tim looked around and didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and scanned the area to see if there was anything that he might have missed. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ raised his hand, and suddenly the area around them shimmered slightly. Barely visible on the ground were railroad-looking tracks that glowed a dull bluish. A circular platform appeared under their feet. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ sat down. "Everyone, please, sit down and make yourselves comfortable. In fact, sleep if you are tired. I shall wake everyone when we arrive." Tim and Joy sat down, and Tim decided he was pretty tired. He lay down, and Joy snuggled up next to him. Rachel sat near them and was too excited to even think about sleeping. Zanari sat and closed her eyes. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ closed his eyes as well, and suddenly the platform began to slide slowly. At first, as if it had been slumbering for a very long time and needed to wake up. It slid with no sound and started moving faster and faster. Rachel was amazed as it slid along, kicking up sand from underneath it. The landscape was bland and barely visible. She had no idea how fast they were going. Every so often, they would startle a shark or a dolphin. At one point, she heard the sound of a whale song. She couldn't actually see it, though. She felt it was near. She got nervous that even sitting, that perhaps they might come close to something and she might get knocked off the platform and fall out the range of ᶠᶸᶜᵏ's protection. "Relax, Rachel. The platform is protecting you now. I still have my wards up around you. but nothing had come in contact or near us while we were on the platform. She smiled and nodded. She laid back and noticed there was no real sensation to the platform. It just felt solid under her. She closed her eyes and listened. There was no sound. There was no sensation of movement. It was just still. She wondered if a sensory deprivation tank was different than what she was experiencing as they slid effortlessly along the ocean floor. Tim was asleep in a few seconds, which was no surprise to Joy. She, on the other hand, was having a difficult time sleeping. Her mind was reeling and filled with so many questions. Her fear and anticipation was barely controllable. She was worried about Tim. Was it him or her that had caused the burnout on the beach? She wanted to keep an eye on Tim and make sure he didn't lash out and cause any problems while he slept. She had been asleep for a long time and had not slept since Tim was taken, and yet she wasn't tired. She didn't understand what was happening to her and Tim, and that was the other issue that prevented her from sleeping. She watched Tim snore away and she was envious. He never had a hard time sleeping, while she would spend hours at night obsessing over the many details of her life. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ meditated, focused on Tim and Joy. Tim was asleep and dreaming of eating Twinkies of all things, and Joy was wide awake, mind racing with dozens of thoughts coming at her from all sides. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ wondered, how were they able to manipulate universal energy so easy when it took Anukai thousands of years of training? What was he missing? Something was different. He had to rule out the manipulation of the ring, since they would only allow them to communicate with ᶠᶸᶜᵏ, and also allow for recall of what happened to them if they were to die. They were not powerful enough to allow them to shift and control as they were doing. His mind suddenly rested on the milk. The milk had been known only to a handful of Anukai, as it was discovered by Kunaks when they first arrived on Earth. The Kunaks meddled with it and went mad and eventually fell under Anukai blades. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ's father had returned the milk to the place where they had discovered it, and the council ordered that no one ever tamper with the milk again. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ realized there are many rules he was bending ever so slightly to achieve the goals he had laid before him. He silently hoped that these rules wouldn't break under his subtle pressure. The Anukai were very clear in their laws, and if broken, there were dire consequences. He continued speculating if somehow the milk had inadvertently mixed with the Anukai energy that ᶠᶸᶜᵏ had placed in Tim and Joy's ring. He would have to spend time with them to determine their capabilities. Suddenly he noticed Zanari shudder. What is it? Death. One of my mirrors just died, crushed. Hard to maintain the others. Breathe and focus. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ noticed a small trickle of blood from Zanari's nose. He focused on her and healed her gently so as not to interrupt her concentration. She was deep in focus now. Pull your energy into your core and focus on stability. Another of my mirrors has died. Where are they at? San Francisco. Pull the mirrors closest to them to you now. Zanari did as she was ordered, and discipline and training took over. She washed away the fear and regained her composure. She pulled the mirrors which were closest to the ones who died away and was horrified to see buildings collapsing. Zanari, do not be concerned. It was an earthquake. When we get to the main city of Atlantis, we'll learn more, I'm sure. His calmness eased her slightly and she nodded. Meditate now and heal yourself. They both returned to their sitting positions and closed their eyes. They traveled on for another 2 hours and they were surrounded on all sides by darkness. Rachel had fallen asleep, as had Joy and Tim. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ opened his eyes as Zanari stood up. Wake them gently, Zanari. We are here. Tim and Joy woke quickly. Rachel took a few moments to compose herself and she stood slowly. Where are we? Rachel asked sleepily. Atlantis. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ closed his eyes and held his necklace with a firm grip and said a single word which Tim forgot the moment he heard it. The platform they were on shifted slightly and then started to drop down into the ground. It moved quickly, but not too fast where anyone felt like they were losing their footing. After about 4 minutes, a slight glow illuminated the tunnel they were in. Tim got close to the edge and could see light streaming up towards them. The tunnel they were in was almost glass smooth and it had a slight shimmer to it. It looks alien, ᶠᶸᶜᵏ said with a smile. Yeah, because it is in a way. When the Atlanteans were here, they had to make sure it was livable because at the time the Earth was still very cold. They used some of the remainder of the technology we had with us to carve out the tunnels and use a lot of energy stored in this location. They discovered an energy source on this continent, which was unique to the planet. Using crystals harvested from deep underground here, they manipulated energy even when the Earth was sleeping. The shimmering you see there is fine dust of the crystals. As we get closer to the main city, the energy will grow. I think you're going to like this, Joy. Joy stood next to Tim as the light grew brighter, so bright that they momentarily had to shield their eyes as it reached its full brilliance. Joy gasped as ᶠᶸᶜᵏ pointed. The platform stopped, and they were looking at a city easily 3 times the size of San Francisco. It had towers made of crystal, small buildings all arranged facing the central pyramid. The pyramid was made of pure gold, reflected the light coming from the crystal structures that surrounded it. The city was in the bottom of a giant pocket of crystals. Crystals of all shapes and sizes hung from the ceilings of the grand chamber. A pyramid? asked Tim, pointing at it. ᶠᶸᵏ nodded. Yes, the very first one, the most powerful one. This pyramid was a channeling mechanism and also allowed the Atlanteans to flee this area once it was swallowed by the ocean. Their population was too much for the city to sustain, so they fled the crust after we did, and have been waiting for the convergence for a long while. They will return to the city once the convergence is over. Atlantis will rise again, and all you see here will resurface as well. It was a surreal experience. There was air, and the tunnel they had arrived through was barely visible, lost in a maze of crystals. It was warm, and Tim noticed that there was a slight breeze. Wow, feels like the beach. The heat is from the nearby magma tunnels. These crystals keep out all the dangerous elements and create a livable environment. I spent a few hundred years in here, off and on, studying the environment, and I can honestly say there is no other place on the crust that can match this. Tim thought he heard the faint sound of music. Is anyone else here? Sadly, no. The few who decided to remain died a long time ago. The music you are hearing is the crystals. They sing. Some have speculated that the crystals are aware. Tim strained, and the music sounded like feminine Gregorian chants. It's beautiful. ᶠᶸᵏ nodded and closed his eyes. The platform again began to move. It slid towards the pyramid. Where are we staying at? asked Tim. The pyramid. This place is huge. Yes, it is the capital city. There are 20 more chambers similar to this one, but this is the crown jewel. Wow, so Atlantis is big, ᶠᶸᵏ nodded. Yes, it is very large. There are 2 main continent pieces connected by tunnels. This is the western continent. The eastern and larger of the 2 is just west of Portugal. There are twin pyramids there, but they aren't made of gold. And gold is important. Why? It's an ore from the earth, which allows for easier manipulation of universal energy. As we get closer to the convergence, normal humans will be able to do incredible things with gold. The more gold they have, the more they can tap into. But there's also risk to those who don't know what to do with the energy. Oh shit, imagine if Mr. T was still wearing all that gold. Joy laughed and slugged Tim in the shoulder. Can you go more than 10 minutes without some wise-ass joke? Nope. Joy stepped past him and got closer to ᶠᶸᵏ. Will they be able to do what we do? He shook his head. Doubtful. What will they be able to do? Read minds, project thoughts, basic transmutation of one thing into another. Nothing like what Tim did. Joy nodded and looked nervously at Tim. Well, at least here we won't have to worry about killing anyone by accident, right, Zanari? Joked Tim. Zanari considered this and nodded. They got closer to the pyramid, and when they came upon it, they all realized just how massive the structure was. There were hundreds of thousands of gold slabs in place, and they were smooth as glass. Tim wondered how they were able to make the bars so smooth when he smiled to himself. What's so funny, Tim? I just figured out how they built this. ᶠᶸᵏ leaned closer. How? With their minds. They just willed it a certain way, and the gold did what they wanted. ᶠᶸᵏ smiled. In a way, you're right. When you meet the Atlanteans, you can ask them for a demonstration. Tim nodded. So what's the deal with the pyramids? I've seen them everywhere, and had a friend of mine who swore it was like one of the symbols of the Illuminati. Illuminati? ᶠᶸᵏ seemed at a loss for a moment, then laughed. Ah, yes. But your friend is right. The pyramid is a holy symbol of the Draconians. We found that their symbols hold great power on the crust, and so there was a melding of cultures between our 3 races. I believe the Drakes still used it as markers. They influence a great deal on the crust, and I'd imagine they have their claws in damn near everything by now. Do you think they are nervous about the convergence? Asked Joy. No. If I know them, they have multiple contingencies in place. Plus, with the Kunaks helping them, there is no doubt they will hole up somewhere and ride out the chaos. The platform rose to the top of the pyramids, and the top was opened wide enough to allow the platform to slide down into it. This will be home base for the next 12 months. The chamber opened up into a very wide room with several hallways. The decor reminded Tim of a fancy, rich, modern airy lofts with lots of wide open space. Wild angles jutted this way and that. There was a huge crystal in the center of the room, and many cushions were positioned neatly around it. There were several larger cushions also pointing towards the central crystal. "What's up with everything pointing towards the big crystals?" asked Tim. "You sleep with your head at top. That way you share dreams with your mates." "Mates?" ᶠᶸᶜᵏ nodded. "They are Anukai, but they have different cultural beliefs than we do. While we mate with only one, they have several mates at the same time. The royal family had 9 men, 9 women, and they all belonged to each other." "Wait, you mean they were swingers?" "Swingers? They were interested in increasing their population, and when you live for more than 30,000 years, you tend to want variety. That is how it was explained to me." Tim thought about that. "Yeah, I can see how Joy would get sick of me after 1,000 years or so. More like 50 years, she jabbed him. "Damn you, cold piece, you know that?" ᶠᶸᶜᵏ walked to the main crystal. "Tim, lay down on that bed there." Tim shrugged and did as he was instructed. ᶠᶸᶜᵏ ran his fingers along the crystal ring which ran along the outer edge of the large crystal, and it vibrated and hummed slightly. "Cool," said Joy. "Okay, Tim, prepare yourself for something a bit different." Tim was about to say something when his eyes focused on something that Joy couldn't see, and he blurted out, "Wait, go back." ᶠᶸᶜᵏ ran his finger back for a brief moment. "Holy fuck." "What?" asked Joy. "I think I'm watching the news and there's some bad stuff going on right now." "Such as?" "Earthquake." "What? How are you seeing? I want to see." Joy went to an adjacent bed and lay down. She felt a wild vibration at the base of her skull, and a few feet in front of her, images materialized. She could see a young, pretty newscaster could hear her speaking. Rachel copied Joy. She also took position on one of the beds. Denari closed her eyes and waited. She experienced some of what they were seeing, and she had no desire to revisit it. "We are reporting again live from downtown San Francisco that an 8.0 earthquake has hit central Daly City, devastated much of San Francisco and outlying areas. The first quake hit at 7:25 a.m., lasted for 20 seconds. It was followed an hour later by a 7.9 earthquake, which lasted 15 seconds. Fires can be seen everywhere, and there is major structural damage and collapses." "Jesus," said Tim with a solemn tone. The cameraman panned the area, and Tim and Joy both shuddered as they saw their old apartment complex completely obliterated. "Man, that's our old place. If we were still there, we'd be..." Tim couldn't finish his sentence. He was suddenly aware he was supposed to be dead many times over, and he was beginning to think he was cheating death. Tim sat up and the image faded. "What the hell, man? I thought there was 12 months before the convergence." "Yes, that is true, but it doesn't happen all at once. An event happens here, event happens there. Recall the earthquakes in Japan and Chile. Those are examples of what will come, all gaining in intensity and destructive nature until it culminates with the fusing of all 5 outer dimensions into one crust. The Earth is waking up. She will be much more before the full convergence. This is just beginning." Tim was scared and relieved at the same time, scared to see what was going to happen, and relieved that he was with Joy and ᶠᶸᵜᵏ. Chapter 43. Contingency Plans. January 1st, 2012. New York, 8:59 p.m. Richard watched the news and saw the city by the bay burning. He wasn't shocked. He knew it was coming. Any other Draconians had long removed all vital personnel from red zones and knew there was nothing of importance lost in the disaster. He knew also that the earthquakes would continue for at least a week and would cause much more destruction after the fact. Projected death toll was well over 1 million residents, and that number also was to rise as time went on. The only thing which was of concern to Richard was the timing. The convergence was going to affect many things, and he had read all the reports from previous mergings, but the timeline on this seemed accelerated somehow. The Kunaks had predicted the large earthquake along the San Andreas Fault wouldn't go until the end of first quarter. This was 3 months ahead of schedule. If they were off by so much with this event, what of the others? Richard stood up and walked from the comfort of his oversized chair and wondered silently if the preparations the Draconians had spent trillions on was going to be sufficient for the convergence. He shrugged and retrieved his phone. Dialing a number, he waited. A single ring, and he heard Dimitri's voice. "Yes, Richard?" "What does our Kunak friends have to say about the quake?" "They are somewhat indifferent in their answerings of my question. I pointed out their timeline was off by a large factor. They simply replied their estimations are just that, estimations. They are using data from previous convergences, and as you know, each one was different from the previous. This is the first convergence where all planes will come in contact with the crust." "I understand that. My question is a bit more urgent. Do they still think the underground bases will handle the convergence?" "Yes, They made sure these locations were safe from the displacement other areas will face when the planes collide with the crust. And what of the polar shift, the crustal displacement, has also been factored in? The bases are like giant sealed containers. Regardless of what happens above them, we should be safe. Richard nodded. Something in Dimitri's voice told him that the man had been over these specific details many times and was completely satisfied with them. Good. I'm relieved to hear this. Yes. And Tiamat 2 is already secured and loaded in our location. Have you been down there yet? No, I haven't. Been too damn busy to take a trip. You? Yes. It's pretty amazing, really. Ours is large enough to hold 250,000. That's including the animals, food storage, equipment, etc. How much supplies have they packed away this time? Enough for a couple 100 years if we need it. Doesn't take into consideration the food and crops we could harvest on our own if we needed. A bit of an overkill in my opinion. Well, the last few times these convergences have occurred, landscape wasn't useful for a while, and it was uncomfortable. We want to make sure this time things will be covered, just in case. I see. Was there anything else you needed? No. I just wanted to double check, as I know there'll be questions and I like having the answers. I'll let you know if anything else pops up. Richard hung the phone up and paced a bit. He was feeling a bit nervous. He wasn't sure why, but he was trembling slightly. Fear was a normal feeling even for Drakes, but what he was feeling was far more intense than anything he could have ever experienced. It wasn't a convergence. Conflict wasn't the issue either. He cherished the thrill of battle and savored the thought of facing ᶠᶸᶜᵏ again. The planet slayers, he realized, was what was bothering him. He recalled the look on ᶠᶸᶜᵏ's face and knew that even the great ᶠᶸᶜᵏ himself was terrified of the potential of being found by them. He glanced at the television again and watched the newscaster as she showed horrific pictures of buildings on fire. The sky was filled with darkness, and people were walking away with dazed, confused looks on their faces. His phone rang and he glanced down. The caller ID revealed it was Melissa. Yes? So what's the latest? I'm watching the news about San Francisco. Isn't this early? Yes, it is, but I've been informed that all preparations are in place already. If you'd feel more secure, you could take the boys and head down to the bunker. Do you think it wise to go so soon? Richard paused and considered. I think it's wise to prepare for an early transport. You know the events will get wilder as time goes on. Considering the earthquake is a few months early, I wouldn't object if you took the kids within a week. I wouldn't wait longer than a month, all things considered. She paused. And what of you, husband? I'll join you before the final lockdown, she sighed. I shall instruct the boys to go into the bunker and we'll wait with you. That way, I can make sure you make it before lockdown. He chuckled at that. As you wish. What are you doing now? Richard paced the room more, thinking. She could hear a tone in his voice which concerned her. About? After the convergence will be visible to them. She knew what he was referring to. She took a slow, long breath. Do you think they will find us? I can't see how they couldn't. Is there any way to defend ourselves? No. She paused and felt her heart race a bit. What if we fled? There's no place left to hide. This planet was special. We have no time and very little option. But there are options? Yes, potential options. Such as Tiamat and something rumored to be in the possession of the Anukai. How could Tiamat handle them? It won't work until the last possible moment and will require a lot of modification and luck. The device that the Anukai have is remnant of the old technology. If used with Tiamat, there's a slight chance we could stand against them. If we were successful, what would that mean? More time. The victory would be short-lived. It would give us a few decades to plan our next move. It would hopefully take them that long to get their weapons close enough to attack again. You do not sound optimistic, because I'm not. We are running these scenarios based off of our last encounter, which occurred thousands of years ago. Who knows what advancement they've made in that time? The variables are too many to account for. That prevents me from optimism. I understand. I'll check in with you later. She hung up, and Richard felt slightly better discussing his fears with his wife, but the fear lingered on.